So I know it's not that like so. Welcome you all to our lecture series, Voices from the Periphery. I was there. Today we have what I can say that is we have a great honor to have the Sohail Hashmi. Sohail Hashmi is a person who is not only an academician and history buff, but also a filmmaker and knows the essence of Delhi inside and out. Hasmi Sahab is a leading authority on Delhi's history and especially known for his Delhi heritage walks for children and adults. Sahab is one of the founding trustees of Sahmat, the Sabdar Hashmi Memorial Trust. He was a scriptwriter for 40 episodes of a TV serial Tana Bana and later a media consultant at National Literacy Mission for 3 years. He also worked as a content writer, editor for various private TV channels and websites. He has conceptualized, researched, and scripted to produce documentaries on pioneers of women's education, lesser known freedom fighters, and marginalized women. So, sir, thank you, sir, for joining us today for this lecture. We welcome you in our academic channel that is Voices from the Periphery. Sir.
Actually, when you asked me to speak, and I saw the name of the organization that is organizing these talks, Voices from the Periphery. That is when I thought that I will uh, talk to talk about the very idea of mainstream and periphery. And it's considering the fact that you are studying at Nehu, and when Nehu was set up in the, I think it was in the mid 1970s or late 1970s, and some of the people who joined Nehu as faculty were came from JNU, and JNU and Nehu had a very close link in those days, and several of my dear friends went to Nehu and began teaching there when Nehu was set up. And so there is that link also that one feels with Nehu. Now the question of periphery constantly keeps on popping up. It pops up in political science, and it pops up in quite a lot of history that is written, and the very idea that you have a political center, and it is located geographically somewhere within the landmass, which is called India. More specifically, in South Asia, you have the capital currently in Delhi. The capital was for 50 odd years when the time when we were colonized by the British. 50 years of that, 53 years, I think, Calcutta was the capital. There was a time, short time, when Alauddin Muhammad bin Tughlaq shifted the capital to in West UP, in West India, in a place that was called Deogiri, and later Muhammad bin Tughlaq renamed that place as Daulatabad. There was a time in the 13th century when the capital was at Lahore for a short while. And then in the Mughal period, Lahore became capital for a short while. But throughout this period, Delhi has been the capital for a major part of the year, of roughly the last close to 1,000 years, but 800 years more, most certainly. And when we talk of the periphery, we talk of the periphery in India, we generally talk of the periphery with reference to Delhi as the center. And therefore, uh, Tamil Nadu, Kerala become the periphery, Kashmir becomes another periphery, bordering areas of Punjab with what is now Pakistan, or of Rajasthan bordering Pakistan, that becomes another periphery. And the entire the seven sisters of the Northeast are treated as another periphery. So, if you were to ask somebody to geographically define the periphery of India, these will be the peripheries. We have been told in political science that forces that bind, or forces where political power is concentrated, is strongest at the center, and it is weakest at the periphery. The impact of political power and its influence and its uh, unfolding would be more specifically centered around the center of power, which would mean Delhi. And it will be weaker as you move away from the center of power. And therefore, what are called as fissiparous tendencies would be more strong at the peripheries, and powers that, forces that unite, that bind, they'll be strong at the center. That is the common understanding of this whole periphery and main and center. Now, we are constantly taught this framework. Now, over the years, I've been looking at this, and there was a somebody who I've learned greatly from pointed out something very interesting. For 800 years, the rulers in this country were Muslims. From the 12th century, toward the fag end of the 12th century, 1192-93, Muslims came to control first Lahore and then Delhi. And in the early 13th century, 1210 onwards, in the time of Iltutmish, the capital shifted to Delhi. The slave dynasty, with the exception of Qutbuddin Aibak, ruled from Delhi, followed by the Khiljis, who ruled from Delhi, followed by the Tughlaqs, who ruled from Delhi, except for Muhammad bin Tughlaq, who took the capital to Adilabad and brought it back to Daulatabad and brought it back to Delhi. And after the Tughlaqs and the sacking of Delhi by the Mongols, what was his name? Tamerlane, to be more precise. After the sacking of Delhi by Tamerlane, Delhi was ruled first by the Sayyids and then by the Lodhis. And then came the Mughals, who took the capital to Agra, which is 200 kilometers, 190 kilometers from Delhi. And the capital kept on shifting between Delhi and Agra. For some time it was in Agra, then it came to Delhi, and then it went back to Agra in the time of Akbar, and then it came back to Delhi and then stayed put in the time of Shah Jahan. And then it continued till the British took the capital away. So it is the area around Delhi, Delhi and the area around Delhi, where the political power of the Muslim kings is concentrated. We are also told that, and this is what we are told in history, where there isn't enough, there isn't actually very little, there is very little evidence to show, but we are increasingly being told that it is the Muslim rulers who forced the non-Muslim population of India, they forced them to convert to Islam. And this theory is gathering momentum, and every day there are attempts, very open attempts, to settle historical accounts and to fix the to correct the atrocities of the past and create an India which existed before the arrival of the Muslim. Now, this is the discourse that is gaining ground systematically. But if you look down at the ground, what do you see? Before India was partitioned into India and Pakistan, which is 1947, if you look at the India of that time, what do you see? Where is the concentration of Muslims in India, pre-partition India? Where were the Muslims concentrated? They were concentrated in Kashmir. They were concentrated in Kerala. They were concentrated in Punjab, and they were concentrated in Bengal. When I started speaking, I had identified these areas as the peripheries of India. The second point I made was that the politics and the power of the ruling classes, the ruling dispensation, will be more acutely felt in the center. But in reality, this is not what is happening. Had the Muslims who rule from Delhi been forcing people into conversion, their impact would have been the strongest in the center. But no, Delhi and its periphery, the percentage of Muslims even today and even at the time of partition was never more than 25-30%. But in what is now Bangladesh, more than 50%. At places it was 60%. In Punjab, which is now part of Pakistan, that part of Punjab, there was a big concentration of Muslims. And in Balochistan, in northwest frontier province, which is now Pakhtunkhwa, these were the areas where Muslim populations were concentrated. They were concentrated in Kerala, and they were concentrated in Kashmir. And inside the Kashmir Valley, the concentration of Muslims was close to 80%, or even at places even more. So obviously, the theory of mainstream and periphery doesn't operate in this case. There were obviously other factors that are operating, and the center periphery theory does not explain this. There is something else that is going on. There is also, and with specific reference to the Northeast, the Northeast is, and all the seven states, with perhaps possible exception of Assam. All the others are supposed to be places which every second day you get an appeal from Delhi asking them to join the mainstream. And that is the second point I want to touch upon. We want people of Nagaland, of Manipur, Tripura, of Meghalaya, Arunachal to join the mainstream. But this does not end only with the people of the Northeast. The discourse emanating from Delhi is asking, has asked in different parts of time, has asked Punjab to join the mainstream. The discourse emanating from Delhi has also asked the four southern states to join the mainstream. And the discourse emanating from Delhi has also asked Kashmir to join the mainstream. Now we really need to think about this. What is the mainstream? What is it that we are describing and presenting as the mainstream? The Northeast is out of it. Punjab is out of it. Kashmir is out of it. The four southern states are out of it. We are also asking the tribal people to join the mainstream. We are asking people of Chhattisgarh, we are asking the Bhils and Santhals and Gamets and Chaudharis and all the northeastern tribal people to join the mainstream. Those who resist the imposition of Hindi at the cost of their own mother tongue, which is Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, sorry, Malayalam. These four languages, there has been resistance when you impose Hindi on them. We want them to adopt Hindi. And this is a strange kind of a one-way traffic. Nobody in North India has been asked to learn Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam. Sorry. This is despite the fact that all the four languages have written literature that is far more evolved and of a greater historical antiquity than anything that Hindi can produce. Hindi as a language is identified with Bhartendu Harishchand, who is known as the father, Pitama of Hindi. And he died in the 20th century. Tamil has written literature that goes back more than 1,000 years. In terms of the constitutional position, we do not have a national language. We actually have 26 national languages. And all of them have the same status as far as the Constitution of India is concerned. We have two link or administrative languages, English and Hindi. States where Hindi is spoken and understood have the option of communicating with the center in Hindi. All the other states have a right to communicate with the center in English, or they can communicate in their own language. And going by the principle of equality of all the national languages, it should be the duty of the central government, of the federal government, to reply to a letter that comes from Kerala or Tamil Nadu or Telangana or Andhra in their respective languages, to respond to them in their respective languages. Just as a letter from UP coming to them in Hindi is replied to in Hindi. But this actually is the problem with the periphery and mainstream debate. We need to recognize that what is presented to us as the mainstream is actually representing a very small population of this country residing in what is known as the Hindi speaking heartland. In and around Delhi, 200 kilometers, 300 kilometers, and 400 kilometers, let's stretch it in every direction. There are a large number of people who in Haryana who do not in remote parts of Haryana, villages which are not connected to the national highway, large number of people who do not understand easily the Hindi that we speak in Delhi. Their number is even greatly reduced in Punjab, across Punjab, and in Rajasthan, and in Himachal, and in Garhwal, and in other parts of Uttarakhand. There are a large number of people who do not understand or speak Hindi. And let's not even talk about remote parts of Ladakh or Kashmir, where Hindi is not a language that is easily understood. In Bengal, in Odisha, in all the 7 states of Northeast, in Jharkhand, in Chhattisgarh, there are large populations who do not understand Hindi. So, when those who speak Hindi are presented as a mainstream, the question to be asked is, how does Hindi, or those who live in the so-called Hindi heartland, How, by what right do they become the mainstream? How can they arrogate to themselves the right to be described as the mainstream? In a country that has more than 2 dozen national languages, constitutionally, which does not recognize a special status for any language. How is it that day in and day out, people keep on talking of the mainstream and asking others to join the mainstream? You look at the attitude that emanates from Delhi. Large number of people living in Delhi who have grown up in Delhi, they do not know that the 4 southern states speak 4 totally different languages. For a normal Delhi wala, they are all Madrasis. And a normal Delhi wala, people living in the northeast. How they are described, how their languages are described, is very, very parochial. How their food habits are described is very parochial, very, very narrow minded. And it is the same about what they think of the people of the hills, what they think of the people of Kashmir or of Punjab, etc. Now, what I'm underscoring is the fact that the idea of a mainstream in India is a false idea. We do not have a mainstream. India has a large number of mainstreams. We don't have one mainstream. Just as we have 26, or is it more, 28? You will need to check in the on the net. How many languages does the Constitution currently recognize as national languages? I'm sure all of you know that culture and language have a very close affinity. A culture finds reflection through a language, and every culture is identified and is marked by a specific kind of music, specific food, specific attire. I'm not even getting into religion, because each region has their own religious practices, their own rituals, their own taboos, their own totems. I'm not getting into any of that. Let us look at what people drink, what are their traditional beverages, what are their traditional food, how do they cook, let's say rice, what kind of rice people cook, what varieties of rice people cultivate, how many ways do they have of eating rice, and how is it different from people from other parts of the country. Their attire, their food, their music, their myths, they are radically different from each other. Within the Northeast, there are these different, so many different communities. Take the Nagas, for example. Within the Nagas, there are so many different traditions within the Nagas. And similarly in Mizoram and Meghalaya, Manipur, Tripura, the diversity is phenomenal. To club all the seven states of the Northeast into one is doing great violence to their linguistic and cultural and food and attire and the diversity of all that. There isn't one stream in all of Northeast that can be identified as the defining practice of the Northeast. There isn't one. There could be seven, or there could be eight, or there could be 10, but certainly not one defining stream of culture in the Northeast. It is the same in the South. The four major states, and within each state, the diversity is phenomenal. North Tamil Nadu and South Tamil Nadu, North Kerala and South Kerala, North Karnataka and South Karnataka, and Telangana and Andhra. And this diversity, these diverse, diverse streams that operate and that exist and coexist, spread all over the country, we need to honor, respect, and celebrate each one of them. If we want this country for its culture, its languages, its historic traditions, its literary traditions to flourish, we need to recognize this diversity. And without understanding this diversity and without celebrating this diversity, we cannot hope to keep to we can never hope that the entire potential of the people of this country will be realized. For example, we keep on talking of the great culture that evolved around the Ganga and the Jamuna, the Indo-Gangetic plain. And we keep on talking that. It's a phenomenal cultural, the range of cultural artifacts, practices, beliefs, music, dances, painting, all that architecture that evolved here is phenomenal. But how can you privilege it over other cultures that developed along other rivers? The phenomenal culture that have evolved and developed around, let's say, the Brahmaputra, around the Rongit, around Tista, around Kaveri, around Jhelum, around Ravi, around the Indus. The oldest civilization that grew in this country around the Indus River. We do not know till today what their religious beliefs were. We do not know what their language was. We have absolutely no idea about their cultural practices, about their beliefs, about their music. We have no idea because we do not understand their language. But we have enough evidence that all along the flow of where the Indus used to, the valley through which the Indus flew, there was a major urbanized culture that developed, beginning from parts which are now in Pakistan, in Sindh, where Mohenjo-daro was first excavated, from there spreading right into Haryana, into Rakhigadi, into Farmana. This was a massive culture. We know very little about it. But that was 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago. But aren't we treating the existing cultures that are and languages that are spread all over this country with the same disdain by insisting that the mainstream is the mainstream that exists in and around Delhi? Because within the practices, cultural practices in India, are we prepared to recognize the phenomenal diversity? For example, there is one god in the south who is the most popular god, especially in Tamil Nadu. It's a very popular god, Murugan. Murugan is not worshipped in the north at all. Murugan is Kartike, the son of Lord Shiva. He is the biggest god in Tamil Nadu, but he is not worshipped in North India, barely worshipped. And all the rituals associated with Kartike, which is how large number of Hindus define their religious practices in Tamil Nadu. But if they were to come to North India and begin to practice those rituals, will the North Indians recognize and identify them as practices of Hinduism? One can go on about raising these issues. The essential point that I'm trying to make is that the idea that there is a mainstream in India which everybody else has to join, then what kind of a mainstream is that when everybody is out of it? You want the four southern states to join the mainstream? You want the northeastern states to join the mainstream? You want Punjab to join the mainstream? You want Kashmir to join the mainstream? You remove all this, then what is the mainstream? When everybody is out of it, how can this be called a mainstream? There is a deliberate refusal to recognize the cultural, linguistic, historic diversity of this country. The idea of presenting one mainstream is actually essentially anti-democratic. To present one mainstream that everybody has to join is an anti-democratic position. It's a position that militates against the very idea of the cultural diversity which is celebrated in our constitution. It is not merely a diversity of language. It is also a diversity of food, of attire, music, of rituals, all rituals of life. There is a phenomenal diversity. The idea that everybody has to join one mainstream and everybody has to believe and begin practicing what is practiced by the so-called mainstream. Is not merely an anti-democratic, a non-democratic idea. It is anti-democratic. It is actually authoritarian. The only way this country can prosper and advance is through not merely the recognition of this diversity, not merely the recognition of the idea that we do not have a mainstream, that we have a large number of mainstreams. They are localized mainstreams. And it is the coming together of all these while retaining their identities but coexisting. It is this that makes for the phenomenal diversity of this country. And in anything that you look around, the diversity that this country presents is phenomenal. We do not have a parallel to this diversity anywhere else in the world. It is this that makes us unique. And any attempt to paper over this diversity, any attempt to, instead of the diversity, to talk of a mainstream, is doing great harm, great violence to what makes us unique. Essentially, that is the point that I wanted to make about this whole idea of presenting the practices, beliefs, lifestyle of one section of this country's population. No matter how centrally located they are. If their lifestyle is presented as the mainstream of this country, then you are excluding virtually 80% or 90% of this country's people and their cultural practices and their languages and their music, and you are reducing them to a secondary status. And if we persist with this, we are going to be we are going to reduce ourselves into extremely poor, poverty stricken, pauperized people, culturally, linguistically, historically. We need to recognize, accept, and celebrate this diversity. We need to every day underscore the fact that it is our diversity, the phenomenal diversity, that makes us into what we are. And any coercive steps, any deliberate erasure of this diversity, or even a denial of the existence of this diversity and of privileging one kind of a lifestyle, one kind of a language, one kind of food habits over the others, is going to do great harm to this country. You know, if you walk into a restaurant, and especially area around Delhi, within the 300, 400 kilometers Delhi. You walk into a middle class restaurant, you are presented a menu card. You look at the menu card, the top billing is given to the food that is eaten around this area. It's been identified with this area and it is called Indian. The next category of food that is presented is called South Indian. The people who create these categories did not think for a moment that if you are talking of Indian food, then the food of the four southern states should be included in that. What is Indian food or any food that claims to be Indian if it does not include food from four states of India? How is it that you serve the food of the seven northeastern states and call it Chinese food? We are doing great violence to our own people by calling this food Indian and identifying all the other food as non-Indian. And surprisingly, then what is described as Indian food has no meat in it. No chicken, no fish, no mutton, no pork, no meat at all. This despite the fact that 65% of this country's population are people who also eat meat. They eat vegetable, they eat pulses, but they also eat meat. But you have created this category called Indian food in which you have no meat. How's it? All our coastal people eat fish. All our tribal people eat meat. All our Dalits eat meat. Are they not Indian? How can you exclude their food and present something as Indian food which does not include the food eaten by our Dalits, by our tribals, by our minorities, and by our coastal people? And I'm not included in this. The Brahmins in this country who eat meat, and there is a large number of them, all the Bengali Brahmins, large number of Brahmins of the northeastern states, the Brahmins of the hills, Garhwal and Uttarakhand and Kashmir, Kashmiri Pandits, all of them are meat eaters. And the Kshatriyas. But we present food which has no meat and we call it Indian, as if all meat eating people are not Indian. This fits in with this idea of an extremely exclusive group that begins to describe themselves as the mainstream. And what they think is right is presented as the mainstream, and everybody else is supposed to join that mainstream, that imaginary mainstream. And there are various aspects of our life which you can pick up and give them this kind of scrutiny. And then you will see that the idea of any kind of mainstream in India is a false idea. It is the periphery what is described as the periphery, which represents a large number of the cultural diversity of this country, and that is the identity of this country, the phenomenal diversity. That is the only mainstream in this country. The recognition and celebration of that mainstream, the mainstream of diversity, that to my mind is the only mainstream in this country. Aside from that, there are no other mainstreams. And therefore, nobody has to join any imaginary mainstream. Everybody has to learn to celebrate and strengthen their own cultural identities, and it is only through the celebration of these diversities that we will grow into a really vibrant people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for this astonishing lecture. Um, it's a very powerful lecture, I can say, because nowadays this kind of periphery and the mainstream idea is more and more relevant because we all know there's our political situations in India. So, and even if I can remember a book by G. Alusius, Nationalism Without a Nation in India,
Mm.
where asked the question if there is a nation in India, because in India there are so diverse things, so we can't call it it's a nationalism, quote unquote nationalism, what in is like an European concept nationalism, where
Mm.
quote unquote nationhood is a kind of 18th or 19th century. So now we will take some questions, but first I have one question
Yeah.
to you. So um, my question is, sir, is the mainstream portrayal of itself as universal, neutral, or normative, a form of ideological violence that erases the specific of the periphery? How does the universalism maintain hegemonic control over both knowledge and power in the special case of India, sir?
No, what you're saying is absolutely right, and that is the entire idea. When you start pushing the idea of a mainstream and say this is the Indian identity, and I have just pointed to a couple of major loopholes in this idea. When you begin to say that we are vegetarians, you are actually discounting 65% of this country's population. When you say Hindi is the national language of India, you are discounting a very large proportion of this country's population that does not understand Hindi, and Hindi is not their language. The day you start describing the way you live in North India and in a small part of North India as the lifestyle of the Indians, you are discounting the cultural identities of a very large population of this country. So, and that is how hegemonies are constructed. Hegemonies are constructed through denial and not through acceptance of those who are different from you. To define your lifestyle as the identity of India, you are denying the agency to all of those people who differ with you. When I say this is anti democratic, This is what I'm getting at. Democracy is not the rule of the majority. This is a wrong understanding of democracy. It is not merely the rule of of the majority. Because, let's face it, when Hitler came to power, the majority of the vote was with him. But did he run a democratic government? It is not the electoral majority or even the physical majority that gives you the right to tell the rest how to live. For example, let's take a very common example. We, an overwhelming majority in this country, gives dowry at the time of their daughter's wedding. We know dowry is a evil practice. It destroys families. It forces them into indebtedness and so on and so forth. But the majority continues to indulge in it. That does not make it correct. The majority is wrong. Those who are opposed to the dowry practice, no matter how few they are right. Similarly, when you can take any uh, practice in our lives which enlightened, educated people identify as practices that are demeaning to a large population or that keeps them under bondage. But a majority continues to practice it. Constitutionally, untouchability is a crime in this country. What is the practice? In all our houses, all middle class people who get help from outside to do their household chores, many of them offer them tea and they think they're being very, they treat them as equal and all that. How many of them keep a separate glass for them? And when you point it out, they say, no. We don't practice untouchability. It is, for hygienic reasons. Somebody who comes into your house and cleans your entire house, washes your utensils, even cooks for you. But she is not entitled to drink water or a cup of tea from a glass or a tumbler that you use. And when you begin to describe this as our culture, our tradition, what are you doing? So, but that is how hegemonies are perpetuated through these small little things, and that is where they need to be attacked. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, thank you, sir. Now we will take some questions from our audience. They can write in the chat box or they can unmute themselves and ask directly to sir the question.
Good evening, sir, and thank you, sir, for giving me the opportunity. Sir, myself Rakhi Mondal, student of Political Science, Ravindra Bharati University. I
Yeah,
have a question, sir.
yeah.
Sir, how do mainstream culture Hello, am I
Hello,
audible?
hello, yes, hello,
Okay. How? Hello, sir.
yeah.
Yes, sir. How do mainstream cultural, political, and economic structures actively marginalize peripheral regions or communities? Is the periphery subordination a deliberate creation of the mainstream to maintain power dynamics?
Obviously, obviously, and what I have been arguing through this presentation that I made is essentially a that we need to question this idea of mainstream. There is no mainstream in this country. The moment somebody begins to present themselves as the mainstream, this is an effort to deny the existence of a large number of streams that define our existence in this country. These are linguistic streams, these are also cultural streams, and they are streams that define the way we live across the phenomenal geographical spread of this subcontinent. The moment you allow one group to say that their idea of India is the mainstream, you are allowing them to violently suppress all the other identities. And that is essentially what this whole discourse is about. Does this answer your question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
So, if anyone has any other questions,
सर प्रणाम, मैं अभिषेक बनारस से।
जी अभिषेक जी।
सर हमारा क्वेश्चन लैंग्वेज पे ही था।
जी
जैसे आपने कहा कि हिंदुस्तान का जो बर्र सगीर है, यहाँ पे 26 भाषाएं मौलिक तौर पे बोली जाती हैं।
नहीं,
और
मैंने ये नहीं कहा।
भाषाई मतलब
मैंने
आपने
कहा
कहा।
हमारे संविधान में 26
जी
लैंग्वेजेस नेशनल लैंग्वेज की तरह रिकॉग्नाइज्ड है।
जी सर, ठीक।
हिंदुस्तान में वास्तव में 4,000 से ज्यादा भाषाएं बोली जाती हैं।
जी सॉरी सर।
जी जी
सर लेकिन ये जो सर आपने हिंदी के आधार पे जो चीज़ें कही कि मतलब ये थोपना बहुत गलत है, सही बात है, हम भी इस बात को मानते हैं। लेकिन सर जो हिंदी भाषी लोग मद्रास जाते हैं, बम्बई जाते हैं या फिर भारत के अन्य क्षेत्रों में जाते हैं और उनके साथ जो वहाँ की क्षेत्रीय भाषा के लोग जो हैं या फिर उनकी क्षेत्रीयता के आधार पे जो उनके साथ कहीं मतलब जिस तरीके से भी डिस्क्रिमिनेशन किया जाता है, तो सर इसको भी रिकॉग्नाइज करने की ज़रूरत है या नहीं? या फिर केवल हिंदी की हेजेमनी और मेनस्ट्रीम तय करके हम
नहीं नहीं देखिए,
वो जो समस्याएँ थी
हाँ
उधर से हो रही थी।
मैं समझ रहा हूँ आप क्या कह
जैसे
रहे हैं।
भाषाई आधार पे जो राज्यों का जो संघर्ष हुआ और जो राज्य बटे गुजरात और महाराष्ट्र और ये सारी चीज़ें।
जी
सर अगर हम एक बड़ी समस्या हिंदी को देख रहे हैं, अगर हम मान रहे हैं, तो वो जो छोटी-छोटी समस्याएँ थी, क्या उनको हम इस पूरे डिस्कोर्स में मतलब विषय नहीं बनाएँगे अपने चर्चा का? जी सर।
नहीं, बिल्कुल बनाएंगे। जो एक अगर आप हिंदी को लेके जो हमारे देश में पिछले 70 साल में हुआ है, उसको अगर आप डिस्पैशनेटली देखें तो आप क्या पाते हैं?
एक मिथकीय उसका एक वर्णन है, मतलब फ़ाल्स नैरेशन बना करके उसको बहुत ज़्यादा महिमा मंडित किया गया है। मैं तो यही देखता हूँ। ये 1700-1800 ईस्वी की भाषा है, इसके पहले हिंदवी था, अवधी था, ब्रिज था। हिंदी जैसी कोई तो
जी
कॉन्सेप्ट मुझे भी नहीं
जी
समझ में
जी
आती
जी।
है।
तो वो एक इतिहास का मामला है। गालिब खत लिखा करते थे और अपने बहुत से मित्रों को खत लिखा करते थे। गालिब के एक वो थे शागिर्द, शिष्य। उन्होंने गालिब के सारे मित्रों को खत लिखा कि गालिब ने जो खत आपको लिखे हैं वो आप लोगों ने बचा के रखे होंगे। अगर आप उनकी एक एक कॉपी मुझे भेज दें तो मैं सारे खतों को इकट्ठा करके छापना चाहता हूँ। तो वो सारे खत उनको, गालिब को के मित्रों ने वो खत इन साहब को भेज दिए। उन्होंने वो किताब इकट्ठी करके गालिब के खतों के का कलेक्शन 1864 में छपा। उस कलेक्शन का नाम था ऊद हिंदी, हिंदी की महक। ये उस भाषा में लिखे हुए थे जिसको आजकल हम उर्दू कहते हैं। उसकी लिपि फारसी थी। फारसी लिपि में उर्दू लिखी जाती है, जिस भाषा को आजकल हम उर्दू कहते हैं। उस जमाने में उसे हिंदी कहते थे। जो गद्य की भाषा थी, प्रोस की भाषा थी, वो हिंदी कहलाती थी। और पद्य या कविता की भाषा जो थी वो रेख्ता कहलाती थी। गालिब के समय तक एक भाषा जो नागरी लिपि में लिखी जाए, भाषा उसकी वही थी जो दिल्ली और इसके आसपास के इलाके में, दिल्ली, आगरा, मथुरा या लखनऊ, अवध, इस इलाके में बोली जाती थी। उसी भाषा को अगर आप नागरी लिपि में लिख दें और उसका नाम हिंदी रख दें, और उसी भाषा को अगर आप फारसी लिपि में लिखें और उसका नाम उर्दू लिख दें, तो ये किया गया। ये 1825 में फोर्ट विलियम्स कॉलेज में किया गया। ये जॉन बॉर्थविक गिलक्रिस्ट ने किया। और इस तरह एक भाषा को दो लिपियों में लिख के एक भाषा हिंदुओं की और एक मुसलमानों की बनाई गई। इस साजिश को समझना जरूरी है। और उसके नतीजे में क्या हुआ है, जब इस देश के दो टुकड़े हो गए हैं भाषा के नाम के ऊपर, आपने कहा कि भाषा को आपने धर्म से जोड़ दिया। तो ये एक पूरी की पूरी साजिश रची गई। बदकिस्मती हमारी ये है कि जब हम देश की भाषा क्या हो उसके ऊपर जब बहस कर रहे थे, उसमें भी ये हिंदुओं की भाषा और मुसलमानों की भाषा की तरीके से ट्रीट की गई, और जिसका नतीजा है हमारे सामने। जिस तरीके से हिंदी भाषी लोग तमिलनाडु में जाते हैं तो उनसे सही सलूक नहीं किया जाता, जिसका जिक्र आपने किया। ये आप बंबई जाइए, आपको वहां इसका बहुत ज्यादा एहसास होगा। आप 3 व्हीलर वाले से अगर हिंदी में बात करेंगे तो किराया बढ़ जाता है। अगर आपने उसको भैया कह दिया तो वो नाराज हो जाता है। तो ये महाराष्ट्र में तो कोई हिंदी नहीं थोपी गई ना। भाषा को लेके जो आपकी अपनी अस्मिता की समझ होती है, अगर आपको लगता है कि आपकी भाषा के साथ ज्यादती की जा रही है, तो जो रिएक्शन होते हैं वो हमेशा सेहतमंद रिएक्शन नहीं होते। और तमिलनाडु में एक समय था जब हिंदी थोपने की कोशिश की, और उसके रिएक्शन में ये हुआ जो आज हम भुगत रहे हैं। अगर हम ये कोशिश करते कि हम सारे हिंदुस्तान के सारे स्कूलों में, ये तो आपको पता है ना, 3 लैंग्वेज फॉर्मूला था हमारे देश में।
जी 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 जी, मातृभाषा और रीजनल लैंग्वेज और एक सेंट्रल लैंग्वेज। जी।
और पूरे हिंदी भाषी क्षेत्र में क्या हुआ?
बस 2 भाषा
नहीं, तीसरी लैंग्वेज संस्कृत इंट्रोड्यूस की गई।
जी, वो तो इधर की। जी जी
हाँ हाँ, यही तो मैं उत्तर भारत की बात कर रहा हूँ।
जी जी जी।
अगर उसके बजाय हम ये कहते कि आप हिंदी पढ़ेंगे और अंग्रेजी पढ़ेंगे और भारत के की कोई भी एक और भाषा आप पढ़ लीजिए। अगर हमने ये शुरू किया होता कि उत्तर भारत में आप दक्षिण भारत की एक भाषा पढ़ेंगे, चारों राज्यों में से किसी एक की भाषा चुन लीजिए, ये हमने अगर जब आजाद हुए थे उस टाइम ये कर दिया होता तो ये मसला ही नहीं होता। हम लोग तमिल, तेलुगु, कन्नडा या मलयालम में से कोई एक भाषा समझ रहे होते तो फिर साउथ के लोग भी हमारी कोई उत्तर भारत की भाषा स्वतःस्फूर्त ढंग से सीख लेते, लेकिन हमने ये नहीं किया। हम में से कितनों ने तमिल को पढ़ने की कोशिश की पूरे उत्तर भारत में? तो वो जैसे मुहावरा है कि ताली दो हाथ से नहीं बजती ना।
जी जी।
तो मतलब ताली एक हाथ से नहीं बजती, दो हाथ से ही बजती है। तो ये जो सिलसिला हुआ है इसमें वो जो जिसकी बात मैं कर रहा हूं इस पूरे समय में, जो मेन स्ट्रीम की बात हम कर रहे हैं, जिस दिन हम अपने आप को मेन स्ट्रीम कहते हैं और दूसरों से कहते हैं कि हमारा अनुसरण करो, तो वो लोग जिनकी भाषा और संस्कृति का इतिहास हमारी भाषा से बहुत ज्यादा पुराना है, वो क्यों करेंगे हमारा अनुसरण?
जी सर, धन्यवाद।
तमिल का 1,00,000 साल का रिटन लिटरेचर है।
जी।
मैथिली का 1,000 साल का रिटन लिटरेचर है। हम मैथिली को कहते हैं वो हिंदी की बोली है। मैथिली हिंदी की बोली नहीं है।
मैं सर ऐड करूंगा, मैं खुद भोजपुरी भाषी हूँ।
मैं आपसे ये जो मैं वही आ रहा था, मैं वही आ रहा था कि भोजपुरी, अवधी, ये सब भाषाएं हैं। हिंदी तो कल जन्मी है,
जी।
भाषा तो भोजपुरी है। कितना पुराना इतिहास है भोजपुरी का, हम उसको रिकॉग्नाइज नहीं करते, कहते हैं हिंदी को मानो, तो रिएक्शन तो होगा। सही कह रहे हैं।
जॉर्ज गियर्सन ने इस चीज को बहुत अच्छे से एड्रेस किया था, उनकी बुक है लिंग्विस्टिक्स।
इन्होंने
जॉर्ज गियर्सन।
हाँ 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 हाँ,
जी।
हाँ।
सर एक चीज, लेकिन मैं माफ करिएगा, बहुत विलम्ब हो चुका है, बट फिर भी आपने एक बात कहा कि लोकतंत्र जो है वो बहुमत का या बहुसंख्यक का शासन नहीं है। लेकिन चाहे अभी हाल ही में मैंने ब्रिटेन की ब्रेग्जिट की जो मामला था, जिसमें वो यूरोपीय यूनियन से अलग होना चाहते थे, वहां भी जनमत संग्रह हुआ और जो बहुसंख्यक समाज था वो यूरोपीय यूनियन में नहीं जुड़ना चाहता था। और वही हुआ। हिंदुस्तान में उत्तर प्रदेश एक सबसे बड़ा सूबा है और 80 लोकसभा सीट आती है, और सबसे बड़े लोकतांत्रिक अगर मानते हैं हिंदुस्तान में तो मैं नेहरू जी को मानता हूँ। तो ये यूपी ही प्रधानमंत्री का केंद्र होगा या कार्य क्षेत्र होगा। रेयरली मुझे मतलब 10-15 में से 2-3 मिलेंगे जो नॉन यूपी या फिर इधर इसी एरिया से अलग के थे।
जी।
तो ये कहीं ना कहीं व्यवहारिक तौर पे तो लोकतंत्र अपने आप को स्वतः प्रमाणित कर रहा है कि वो बहुसंख्यक या फिर बाय प्रैक्टिस लोकतंत्र तो कह रहा है कि मैं बहुसंख्यक का ही शासन हूँ।
नहीं, इसमें प्रॉब्लम ये भी है कि जिस तरीके से हमारे सामने लोकतंत्र की परिभाषा की गई है, हम उसी ढांचे में लोकतंत्र को देख रहे हैं। मिसाल के तौर पर कल इलेक्शन होता है यूपी में, 3 दल इलेक्शन लड़ रहे हैं, मान लीजिए किसी एक सीट के ऊपर, और तीनों की बराबर शक्ति है लगभग। तो एक को 33% मिलते, एक को 34% मिलते, एक को 35% मिलते। मतलब 33 के बजाय एक को 33 मिलते हैं, एक को 31 मिलते हैं, एक को 32 मिलते हैं। 33% वाले जीत गए, जबकि 66% लोग उनके खिलाफ हैं। बहुमत उनके खिलाफ है, फिर भी वो सरकार बना लेते हैं। तो ये जो सिद्धांत है जिसको फर्स्ट पास द पोस्ट, 5 कैंडिडेट हैं तो 20% सबको मिलेंगे तो सब बराबर हो जाएंगे, जिसको 21% मिलेंगे वो जीत जाएगा। 79% उसके खिलाफ हैं और फिर भी वो सरकार बना लेता है। जिस वक्त संविधान बना है उस वक्त उसके बाद से एक सुझाव आया था जिसपे लगातार वामपंथी दलों ने उसके ऊपर कहा है कि ये सिद्धांत होना चाहिए, लेकिन बाकी कोई नहीं मानता है। उन्होंने कहा कि जितने प्रतिशत वोट आपको मिलते हैं उतनी प्रतिशत सीटें आपको मिलनी चाहिए। अगर पूरे देश में आपको 33% वोट मिला है पर आपने सारी सीटें हार दी, इस तरीके से 35% वाले जीतते रहेंगे। लेकिन अगर हिंदुस्तान भर में आपको 33% मिल रहा है और पार्लियामेंट में आपको 33% सीट दी जाएगी, फिर आप देखिए सरकार की शक्ल क्या होगी। तो जो चौकठा बनाया गया है हम उसी चौकठे में देख रहे हैं ना। सवाल यह है कि क्या ये चौकठा जो बनाया गया है ये अपने आप में लोकतांत्रिक है कि नहीं। ये अपने आप में उन्हीं की को हमेशा जिताएगा जो जिनके खिलाफ बहुमत है, वही जीतेंगे इसके अंदर। तो जो लोकतंत्र की जब हम बात करते हैं तो डेमोक्रेसी मतलब मैं तो वो किस्से को हमेशा कोट करता हूं। गांधी जी ने कहा था कि अगर सारा देश एक तरफ हो किसी एक सवाल के ऊपर और एक व्यक्ति ये कहे कि अगर ये फैसला आपने कर लिया तो मेरी जो व्यक्तिगत स्पेस है, माई राइट एज एन इंडिविजुअल, उसके ऊपर हमला होगा और इसलिए ये फैसला नहीं होना चाहिए। तो गांधी जी ने कहा कोई समाज इसके बावजूद ये फैसला कर ले वो जनवादी समाज नहीं। उसकी व्याख्या की उन्होंने। गांधी जी ने कहा कि डेमोक्रेसी की डेफिनेशन ये है कि अल्पमत कितना सुरक्षित है। और मैं धार्मिक अल्पमत की बात नहीं कर रहा हूं, सारे अल्पमत, पॉलिटिकल माइनॉरिटी, कल्चरल माइनॉरिटी, लिंग्विस्टिक माइनॉरिटी, फूड हैबिट के हिसाब से माइनॉरिटी, वो कितने सुरक्षित हैं। क्योंकि मेजॉरिटी का राज तो होता ही है। डेमोक्रेसी वो है जो इंश्योर करे कि अल्पमत को अपनी बात कहने का अधिकार हो। वो है डेफिनेशन डेमोक्रेसी की। वो अमेरिकन, वो ब्रिटिश प्राइम मिनिस्टर था जिसने कहा था, वो बहुत बार कोट किया जाता है कि मैं तुमसे पूरी तरह असहमत हूं, लेकिन तुम्हारा ये अधिकार कि तुम मुझसे असहमति जताओ, उसकी सुरक्षा के लिए मैं अपनी जान दे दूंगा। वो है डेमोक्रेसी। तो बहुमत मतलब वो तो जंगल में शेर का राज चलता है, तो आप उसको वो डेमोक्रेसी कहां से हो गई। आपके पास ज्यादा लोग हैं तो आपने सरकार बना ली, जिसकी लाठी उसकी भैंस, और आप भैंस की सुन ही नहीं रहे। तो जब तक आप ऐसी व्यवस्था नहीं बनाते जिसके अंदर वो जो हाशिए पर डाल दिए गए हैं, जो अल्पमत हैं, जो दलित हैं, जो पिछड़े हैं, जिनको लंबे समय से वंचित रखा गया है, जब तक उनकी बात नहीं सुनी जाएगी तो आप कैसे न्याय संगत समाज बनाने की बात कर रहे हैं? और यही मेन स्ट्रीम और पेरिफेरी का बीच का जो मामला है वो यही है। जिसको आप पेरिफेरी कह रहे हैं वो पेरिफेरी है नहीं। आपने अपने आप को मेन स्ट्रीम कह के बहुमत को हाशिए पर ढकेल दिया और इसलिए ये बुनियादी तौर पर लोकतांत्रिक सवाल है, ये डेमोक्रेसी का सवाल है। जी
धन्यवाद सर, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
थैंक यू वेरी मच, थैंक यू वेरी मच।
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir, for joining us today.
थैंक यू वेरी मच।
It's a again, it's a very, very, very powerful lecture, sir, for all of us. I wish we can talk about more on these kind of talks.
Whenever
And
you
again,
want,
sir,
whenever you want. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
okay, it's our pleasure. It's our pleasure, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
night.
you very much. Good night. Good night.
प्रणाम सर, चरणेश्वर।
प्रणाम प्रणाम।